Hey y'all, Zelda here. I am here today because I've been feeling very called to talk about the Hermit, who is our tarot guide for the year. Now, whether or not you do personal tarot cards for your year or not, or whether you're brand new to tarot, or whether you relate to tarot as like an archetype, this is one invitation to um, use tarot archetypes as a lens through which to reflect upon and inform the kind of like big picture of your year. The way that people find the tarot card for the year is not incredibly unusual. It's like this year is 2025. And so you add up all of those numbers and then you're left with a number. So it would be 2 plus 0, which is nothing. So 2 and then 5, and that adds up to 9. And in the major arcana, which are um, the primary archetypal arc that the tarot follows. Another way to think of that is it's like the main story of the tarot, right? Has all of the major characters, and then there are these kind of like elemental, sometimes called the pip cards or the suits, and there are these like elemental arcs that also happen. But for this purpose, I'm going to use the Hermit. And it also is worth considering all of the nines. So the Nine of Wands, the Nine of Swords, the Nine of Pentacles, and the Nine of Cups. Um, but just for today, we're going to consider the Hermit. And one of the things that I wanted to do is that I actually brought this deck, which is I use a lot of different decks. I have like a whole little area. But this is one of the decks that I have been using the most. It is the one that I use most often with clients. I pull a card before each of my clients, even if we don't do tarot stuff. And it is the Numinous Tarot. I really love it. I feel like it's very inclusive. The art is very, I don't know, kind of like soft, but also evocative. It feels very human to me, and I love it for a very practical and also very creative deck. I love the Numinous Press, so that's an aside, but I'm not like sponsored or anything. I just think Cedar McLeod, who is the artist, and all of their work is incredibly inspiring to me. I have their Uncertain Oracle, which is a round deck. I got their new deck, which is, I can't remember exactly. It's called, oh, the Magic Pantry Tarot. Maybe I'll do a reading with that sometime. It's such a beautiful kind of like food inspired deck. But it is currently in the possession of one of my guides on their altars, and they're not ready to share with any other readings. Um, so that one's currently busy. So instead, I'm going to be using this one. And what I am going to do is I'm going to shuffle it up. I'm going to pull the Hermit out of the deck, and I'm going to pull out the cards also on either sides of the deck. I might pull other cards to clarify additionally. I haven't super planned this out necessarily. I just felt called to come on and spend a couple minutes with you talking about it. But before that, I really wanted to just talk about what messages I've been receiving and considering in inviting the Hermit into my practices this year. I really like these kind of like archetypal teachers of the year, in part because it's a really amazing way to kind of gradually become more and more intimate with the tarot. Taking a really deep dive, especially a year-long one, of a tarot card is a way to really kind of invite that archetype in. And what I mean by archetype is a kind of like a universally is unusual to use because maybe everyone doesn't have that, but kind of like the Jungian archetype are these kind of like universal kind of characters almost. And Jung really thought of them as entities, as real beings. And so I think a lot of times when we think of Jung, we think of like, oh, it's like not real, but Jung was a mystic. And so when I think about archetypes, I also think about them conceptually. I think about the idea of them, what they represent in people's life, how they shift across cultures. But I also think of them as almost like a collective working under a a kind of energetic principle or energetic values, right? That there are these kind of beings, right? Like people have different encounters of different spirits or entities that work under certain archetypes, right? Someone might say, "Oh, I had the Empress come to me and they were or she was like this or they were like this." But every single person is different, and every single person's guides and spirits and archetypes that they work with show up differently because how awesome is that? We're all unique and different, and so are our guides. And so when I think about archetypes, I really think about like you may encounter, if your work is at all like mine, you may encounter like the being of the card. And they may come to you as a spirit that is associated with that. They may have like a lesson or a message for you. You may just encounter the card as like kind of a conceptual energy. It might be an energetic quality. It might have certain other ways that it shows up for you. And this is something that over the span of a year, you can get a really big picture of like, how did this show up for me? What did it look like? What are all the different ranges of ways that it looked like? And how did I get to learn and really kind of partner with that energy? And so, what we are doing is we're moving from the strength year from last year into the hermit year. Before I did that, I wanted to read a little bit about this hermit card. I will share. So for me, oftentimes the hermit is pictured a lot of times like holding this lantern. Um, Making a way like through the dark. There's often a path. There's not often a lot of other people or individuals. It's usually like just one person holding a light of some kind or sitting alone. There are lots of different representations. Sometimes it's an animal, sometimes, but there is a quality, just like the word suggests, of some solitude. And there's usually a path and there's usually some form of light. I really like this book. You see, it's like probably kind of like beaten up because I use it a lot. Not necessarily as a guidebook do I use it, but I think it's a really good reference. And one of the things I love, this is the Valley Tarot Guidebook from Davis Carr and Aaron Elise. And so I opened to the Hermit, and I'm just going to read this because it felt very applicable to me at least for where we're at in the world right now. The Hermit, after interacting so deeply with the social structures and institutions and authorities in justice, they talk about eight being justice, which is true. Eight and 11 are interchanged. I usually read eight as strength, but strength and justice have a lot in common, and also a lot that they can. I love that they can switch that. And so they're saying that because for their reading, they use eight as justice. The hermit calls you to move away from external world and deeper into your self-determination. This is a time to turn inward and narrow your focus to what is right in front of you. It is a time to try to tune out the noise from others and listen to your intuition. It represents a necessary withdrawal into your understanding and your perspective. It is a journey into your deepest, most personal, most intimate self. Ultimately, the purpose of this withdrawal is self-awareness and self-understanding. Walking in the dark can feel agonizingly slow. It is hard to travel one step at a time, but the hermit is here to guide you forward. This is a time to prioritize individual learning or mentorship over the institution. It is a time to deeply connect to practice or tradition or set of values, to immerse yourself within it. It's a time to prioritize your inner needs and focus on tending to them. And perhaps this is best served by working with a therapist or mentor, or perhaps you're being asked to step into the role of guide for another. You're being invited to let go of what isn't serving you and to take what is most important to the next stage of this journey. And the phrase of intention is, I'm not going to read the rest of it, but the phrase of intention, even when the path ahead is obscured, I trust that I am walking towards my truth. And there is one last line that I want to read, but it says, the hermit knows exactly where to go and will lead you where you need to be. On the other side of hermit is liberation. So, phrase of intention, even when the path ahead is obscured, I trust that I am walking towards my truth. This feels like so relevant. It feels so potent for this time where there's so much going on, and I'm not suggesting that anyone take this time to ostrich or stick their head in the sand or ignore the very real scary things that are happening or the very real needs that are emerging. Not at all. In some ways, I'm naming that right now we're at this what feels like tipping point of like social media and data breaches and all these things like communities being under attack, right? And a lot of different community leadership coming up, not all of whom agree with each other, which is expected and fine. And actually, we need to be able to work, to a certain extent. And I know everyone has different opinions on this, but to a certain extent, we need to be able to work across difference. We need to be able to love each other across difference. We need to be able to have differing opinions and still find common ground for things that are common, like human rights, like survival on this planet, frankly. Right? And so, when we think about that, that's big collective work. And we are all also being asked to turn inwards and to realize what it is that we have uniquely to kind of offer this moment. And in this way, this process is almost a process, like that process of like looking inward to find the way forward is almost the sense of like finding and like exfoliating and like shining up and then like utilizing that inner light to show you the way. An image that I had, we're also going through a Venus return right now, that is just starting. Venus is just stationing retrograde. And so, thinking about, I listened to Chani Nicholas's astrology podcast and really love that lens. And she was talking about this like 8-year arc that we have with Venus and going into retrograde and reflecting on 2017 and what happened 8 years ago. And also the reality that in the US, we have someone who is elected who was also sworn in 8 years ago and was sworn in a month ago. Is it only a month? More than a month, I guess now. Got only a month and a week. Anyway, so all that to say that there's this kind of like looking back. And at that time, I was starting my business, actually. I've been in practice for about 8 years now. And so it was a time where I was building my website. I was really like starting to explore how I wanted to show up in the world. And I kept having this image coming up of a person, like a figure, this shadowy figure, dancing through the mist. And like there was nothing that they could see, but they would kind of like dance their way to the next step. And this became a really potent, there was this kind of like, oh, I'm like listening to my inner rhythm and I'm following the thing that I need to follow to the next place. And this image feels very connected to me with my experience of the hermit, which is totally fine. I encourage you to see this as like sometimes we learn through someone saying, oh, this is my experience. And the learning there is to say, actually, that's not my experience. And I learned more about my experience through that pushback of, no, I want it to be different. And I encourage that for you. Maybe you have a really different experience of the hermit. But that even is part of what the hermit is all about, right? Is kind of finding your own inner light and carrying that forward, even though there's maybe no one around you to like check your paper, so to speak, to like look over your shoulder and be like, am I going the right direction? It's like you have to feel it and you have to find the things that allow you to trust and to move forward. Um, this kind of like finding and trusting that inner rhythm, that inner light, it feels like even though there is a light navigating through the dark, we can't rely on being able to see where we are going. And what I mean by that is not where we are going like one step in front of the other. In fact, that is where our sight and our is useful, is kind of like drawing it in and focusing on like one step after the next and like listening and moving forward. But in terms of like seeing the destination and being like, oh yeah, like I've got my GPS out, I know where I'm going. This is like no service, right? We have no service. There's no map. Maybe this is like uncharted territory or uncharted for many of our modern tools that we use and lean upon. So, is there anything else that I should share before pulling the card? Yes. What is it? This is a time hermit work can be very aligned with identifying and finding your values, finding the structures that you can really lean on, that really stabilize and support you, finding the things that are your guiding lights, right? Like seeing almost like if your value is um, liberation and your value is community, then what does that look like for you? What does it look like to live in alignment with that? How does that feel? How does it feel to be in community? For me, that's not necessarily community as like a label is not the word that I chose, even though community is important to me. Um, Things that I have our values are like curiosity. I want to feel curious. I want to move forward based on curiosity. I want to keep my mind open. Um, Compassion or like tenderness is something that I care a lot about. Devotion, coming back to something again and again. Um, Yeah. So I might do another video sometime about values identification because that is work that I do with clients and that is very near and dear to my heart. As you know, kind of cheesy as it sounds, it's very important, especially when we're talking about dreaming up and building new futures, which the hermit is kind of moving towards this dream, even though they don't know for sure that it's there, right? It feels like a pilgrimage of sorts. So, since I have very little time left, I'm going to go through this deck and I'm going to find the Hermit since I already shuffled with you. Okay. Oh, okay. Interesting. So, the Hermit. In behind the Hermit, I'm going to say this is the um so what are these? This is what can hold you back or what can like feel like a hold and what can bolster you forward. Okay. So what is behind that? So this is the hermit. So you can see the kind of imagery that I'm talking about, right? In here, they're kind of floating, which I love. Usually there are mountains or a path. They're floating, their eyes are kind of covered, so you can see that like you can't see the forward, like necessarily the whole way forward. There are all these root systems and like just them holding their light, holding their roots. Yeah. Um, Behind them, what kind of is the holdback? The Five of Wands. So in the Five of Wands, there's a lot going on here, right? Like there's ever look at their faces, right? This feels like something that holds us back is like trying to do that process of looking over your shoulder or trying to like keep an eye on what you should be doing. There's a lot of voices right now around what should the next step be? What should we be doing? What is the right thing to do? And looking to find an external authority or an external like permission to carry your light in this way is not what is being asked of right now. It is very much being asked, not that we shouldn't like listen to community leaders and listen to people who are know what they're talking about, right? Like, absolutely seeking guidance, but like, trust your own feeling about who aligns with your values, where your energy is best spent. And people may be kind of like talking in your ear or going around social media. Also, like, this just feels like a lot of noise, a lot of like chaos in different directions. So the hermit is actually like being asked, like, don't necessarily figure this out in conversation. Like, you can utilize this to help you like understand this, but don't like give this up in favor of this, right? This makes me think like having good firm boundaries around social media. I mean, the therapist in me comes out here, right? Like making sure you're being intentional with your mental space. Like this is your space. Yeah, your imagination, how you're using your attention, your focus. I know it doesn't feel like it, but companies put so much money into trying to take and hold your attention because it is useful. It is some of your force, your life force, your energy in this world. And it is valuable. It's more valuable than I think most people know because we just experience it and it just is, right? But not trying to kind of like escape and like getting some freedom from the noise. And then what helps us propel forward is the Four of Wands, which I love that actually, like kind of like so uncommon in some ways, the same suit. There's a lot of fire there. helping keep this flame alive. The Four of Wands is, Lindsay Mack says this is like play as ritual, play as sacred, play as ceremony, right? This is, look, they're kind of dancing, celebrating. And so it feels like yes to the community or to the container of play and excitement, but the Four of Wands really feels celebratory. Like, what lights you up and what containers can you find that help you to curate and continue to cultivate that flame in a way that is exciting? This feels like an aspect of delight to me, like delight, play, celebratory. Like having gatherings that, yes, are about the future, but also are about what you want. Like, what do you like? What keeps your flame burning? That is something fundamental for this, right? Like, light your flame up here. Don't fight with people about what the right flame is, right? Like, don't waste your energy almost, right? There's a lot of energy that could be wasted in figuring out the right way forward when we all need to be kind of like following what feels like the right way forward together. And yes, participating in these large scale movements, but not in a way that is competitive, I guess. The Four of Candles feels like creating these solid structures to support you with this, whether that is a friend that you have fun with all the time, whether that's just playtime. I will also say the Four of Wands in combination with the Hermit, yes, I hear that, is making sure that you don't only depend on other people to create these spaces for you, making sure that you are cultivating, curating, creating these spaces for yourself. What is your time each week or day when you go and you find what brings you joy, where you play? Reading is coming up, like reading and creating spaces where your imagination is free. And finding freedom in those places helps to cultivate and create freedom in other places as well. There's a reason they want to ban books. Just saying. Okay. That is all for today. I hope that this was supportive. Thank you for spending a little time with me. I would love to hear your associations with the Hermit or anything that supports you in kind of connecting to this archetype. And I look forward to seeing you next time.